Hi, Clarissa Mosley from Calm Mind Psychology, and today we're going to have a very brief introduction to the ego, what the ego is, little brief introduction into how it's formed and why it's necessary to examine your ego in the process of therapy or life in general if you want to become a fuller expression of who you truly are. So join with me, listen on, let's understand a little bit more about our ego. Hi people, it's Clarissa here from Calm Mind Psychology. So I want to start a series on helping you understand your ego and what your ego is and why it's so important that you need to work on it. Now, our ego is essentially how we navigate the world. It holds our beliefs, our values, our choices, our preferences. It's the seat of all judgment, which includes discernment between what we choose, our values of what's right and wrong, and all of our conditioning. In a nutshell, it's the layering of experiences that basically shape who we are. Now, I have coined a term for egos, which is the acronym EGOS, Everyone's General Operating System. Now, I use this term to describe how an ego is basically what we operate through the world from. And I believe animals have got a very sort of nascent, juvenile kind of ego in terms of their personality preferences and their way of behaving, but it's more based on temperament. Our egos, because we experience life and we have the ability to take memories from the past and project them into the future and do cute little things like imagining our own death and demise, we are obviously distinct from animals. So leaving beautiful pets and animals aside, let's look at us and how we've developed this quite sophisticated ego that helps us preserve our own well-being and basically control our instincts. If we go back to animals for a second, they are very instinctual. Everything comes from a very deep, visceral feeling base. We have the capacity with our egos to override our instincts most of the time. Some people do this a little bit better than others. But it basically is our structure of who we are, our identity. Our personality is a little bit more of our external display. It's like our persona. It's like the way we interact with the world is our personality, which is strongly based on our temperament. Now, I mentioned temperament before. So temperamental traits and qualities are a cluster of measurable behavioral outputs or behaviors and characteristics that we see in animals and babies. So when a baby comes out, we can tell after a certain period of time if their temperament is easy, warm, open, or if it's more timid and withdrawn. And these are basic ways that probably the genetic makeup has oriented us to behave at a very basic level. So our temperament interacts with the environment, the world, the others, our carers, our people that we have had relationships with and will, in a way that continues to layer on the shaping of us and the conditioning of us. So as mentioned, the genetics do have a huge influence on our ego and our conditioning and our temperament and our personality, because it's a sort of the clay that we're molded from that comes from the father's genetics and the mother's genetics, but not only them. It unfolds back into our intergenerational lineage in a way that we could never quite comprehend. We don't know, well, we can know what genes we've got from each parent, but we can't quite always understand the epigenetic, and that is the environmental shape and effect of those genetics that can change a lot throughout our lives. A really strong example of epigenetic effects on the individual is the ACEs study, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, a longitudinal study that basically named how trauma and neglect or strong experiences that are not usually positive, negative ones in the childhood can affect health outcomes through an epigenetic process. But that is a whole nother topic. For now, I just want to explain an ego. So, as I mentioned, it's the seat of our values, our beliefs, our judgments, our discernments, our preferences, our self-identity. Let's understand how the ego morphs into these different shapes, because we've all heard of the inner critic. We've all heard of false pride or healthy pride. We've all heard that we should love ourselves, and many people have heard of attachment styles, and all of these things are shaped upon us in interaction. As the infant comes out with a certain temperament, that temperament and that baby's very early personality, they certainly do display different characteristics. They're not the blank slate we used to think they are. So how the baby is going to influence the caregiving. It's a two-way street. It is not the parent who does unto the child. For someone who's had a few kids, I know that each baby elicits a different form of behavior, albeit that I was probably at a different age, stage, place, and a number of children, etc. in my parenting role. But each baby's temperament creates a different form of set of behaviors within a range from me. So it's a two-way street. And this two-way street is what psychologists or early behavioral theorists who started studying babies and their attachment and their temperament and how their minds worked. Like, how do we form these concepts of who's who and what's what, is through this really clumsy word called object relations. Now, I like to reformulate the term object relations because it's kind of very sterile in a way, to describe it as interactional constellations or dynamic self in relationship. Because what happens is this is the basis of our sense of good self and bad self, which gets built upon within our psyche, that becomes the superego that criticizes and judges others and oneself, and the neurotic pride that defends against any slights or any triggers, or comes into the sense of good self and the healthy pride and the sense of the good voice inside that encourages us, the inner cheerleader. So as a baby, how the baby forms its beliefs and models of the world is through the experience of the other, let's say the mother, the experience, let's say it's feeding, it could be bottle or breast, and the feeling that creates within the infant. So, infant's hungry, cries. Mother responds, gets the bottle or the breast out, feeds the baby. The experience of that experience is satisfaction. In that moment, the other, the object that they called it, becomes good and the self becomes good. If the mother's busy or the problem's feeding or for whatever reason, the infant could have colic, and the experience of being fed is not pleasant or satisfying, it's disturbing. And therefore the very basic sense of the other becomes bad and the self becomes bad. Now, don't read into this too much, and I don't ever want to put guilt on mothers. It's just, it could be a father, it could be anyone. It's just the nature of life. And this is an enduring, ongoing thing that happens millions of times. It's not just this one incident. So over the course of time, these basic concepts of other is good, experience is good, I am good, other is bad, or experience is bad, I am bad, form. And they form in relationship. And I hope to make a video one day where I'm going to tell you an awful lot more about how this arises, how this comes up in relationships as you having these feelings and the other becomes someone else. But that's way too much for now. Basic ego has a basic split, And it's the dualistic nature of our universe, of our world, and the way that we think. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it good or is it bad? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it light? Is it day? That's how we operate and see the world. And that is how the ego is formed by a basic split. The good self, the idealized self-identity, and the more neurotic personality, the pride, the good feelings of the self as being good, the good girl and the good boy. And then the bad, the shame, the negative, the bad boy, the bad girl, the stuff that is often pushed into what we call the shadow. Because what happens as we are developing is that we are encouraged in a certain way by our socialization, by the world that we live in, and by our parents to be a certain way. And so the things that are parts of ourselves that are not in alignment with that have to get pushed aside. And that is what we call the shadow. It's the part we identify with, the me that I see, the part that I know I am, and the other stuff, the part I don't want to know about. It's not always bad. There can be some really positive qualities like softness and compassion in a boy, or anger and assertiveness in a female. I'm talking very broadly here, that have to be pushed into the background so that a personality with only these desirable traits that get us love and approval are identified with. And so there is another split. So the superego takes care of making sure that we are adhering to this identity that we have been conditioned over many experiences. Conditioning is a layering of experiences and interactions to identify with and display and own and want. And then the rest of it and the parts of ourselves that we're not approved of, and that as a child we may have needed to sublimate or push aside. But as an adult, part of the work of therapy is going through all of that stuff and going, well, I might need these traits now. These are part of the scope of my human capacity for behavior and being. So we need all of it. And so we need to understand our ego and the bits that we have identified with and the bits that we have disavowed and pushed aside, and the parts which we think or have been told are good and bad. And we need to have the awareness of the censoring of the superego and how our pride and shame operates. And all of these things allow us to be a fuller, more fluid, authentic, spontaneous expression of who we truly are. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to say an awful lot more of it down the track. Thank you. Bye.